Today we bring you one of the most powerful testimonies we've ever shared. This is the story of Rashid, the son of a respected imam in Pakistan, whose life was completely transformed when Jesus appeared to him in a vision. What followed was unimaginable: public disownment by his own father in front of the entire mosque, a death sentence from community elders, and a miraculous escape that left him scarred but alive. Rashid's mother suffered a stroke from the shock, and he now lives in hiding with a price on his head. Yet through it all, he says Jesus is worth every sacrifice. This testimony will challenge you, inspire you, and remind you of the true cost of following Christ. Let's hear from Rashid himself. My name is Rashid, and I am the son of an imam. That single fact defined my entire existence for 24 years until the night Jesus appeared to me and turned my world upside down. This is my story of how following truth cost me my family, my name, and nearly my life, yet gave me something worth dying for. I was born and raised in Peshawar, a city in northwestern Pakistan near the border with Afghanistan. Peshawar is one of the oldest cities in South Asia, with a history stretching back thousands of years. The old city is a maze of narrow streets and crowded bazaars where the smell of spices and kebabs fills the air, where men in traditional shalwar kameez and prayer caps sit in tea shops discussing religion and politics, and where the call to prayer echoes from countless mosques 5 times every day. My father, Maulana Tariq Ahmed, was the imam of one of the largest mosques in our district. He was not just a prayer leader but a respected Islamic scholar who had studied in madrasas in both Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. People came from across the city to hear his Friday sermons and seek his guidance on religious matters. Our home was constantly filled with visitors asking my father to settle disputes, bless marriages, or advise them on Islamic law. Being the imam's son meant I carried expectations from the moment I could walk. I was expected to memorize the Quran, to excel in Islamic studies, to be a living example of Muslim virtue. My father often reminded me that people were watching me, that my behavior reflected not just on our family but on Islam itself. Any mistake I made would be magnified, any sin I committed would bring shame not just to myself but to my father's ministry. I had 3 younger sisters whom my mother cared for at home, but as the only son, I was my father's pride and future. He dreamed that I would follow in his footsteps, perhaps even surpass him as a scholar and leader. From age 5, I attended the madrasa attached to our mosque, spending hours each day reciting and memorizing Arabic verses I barely understood. By age 12, I had memorized the entire Quran, an achievement that made my father weep with joy and brought honor to our family. My teenage years were consumed by religious education. While other boys my age were playing cricket or watching movies, I studied hadith, Islamic jurisprudence, and Arabic grammar. My father was strict but not cruel. He believed he was preparing me for a noble calling, and I believed it too. I was proud to be the imam's son, proud to be entrusted with carrying on the Islamic traditions of our family. But somewhere in my early 20s, questions began forming in my mind that I did not know how to answer. I had memorized the Quran in Arabic, but when I actually read it with understanding in Urdu, some things troubled me. The commands to fight unbelievers, the descriptions of Allah's anger and punishment, the confusing verses about Jesus being just a prophet despite his virgin birth and miracles, all of it created a tension in my mind that I tried to ignore. I was also troubled by what I saw around me. Men who prayed 5 times a day were corrupt in their business dealings. Religious leaders who spoke eloquently about Islamic morality were cruel to their wives and children. The violence done in the name of Islam in our region, the bombings and killings justified by religious scholars, made me wonder if there was something missing in our understanding of God. But these were dangerous thoughts for anyone, let alone for an imam's son. I pushed them down, increased my prayers and fasting, and tried to silence the questions through greater devotion. I told myself that doubts were from Shaitan, the devil, trying to lead me astray. Everything changed one night during Ramadan when I was 23 years old. I had been fasting all day and spent the evening in prayer at the mosque alongside my father. After midnight, exhausted and spiritually hungry despite all the religious activity, I fell asleep and had a vision that was more real than any dream I had ever experienced. I found myself standing in a place of incredible light, not harsh but warm and peaceful. Before me stood a man in white whose presence radiated love and authority in a way I had never encountered. His face was gentle, but his eyes held depths of wisdom and compassion that made me want to fall at his feet. Though he did not say his name, I knew immediately who he was. This was Jesus, the prophet I had read about in the Quran but knew so little about. He spoke to me, not with words I heard but words I felt deep in my soul. He told me that he was the way, the truth, and the life, and that he had come to seek and save the lost. He said he had been watching me, knew my questions and my searching heart, and that he wanted me to follow him. He showed me his hands and feet, and I saw scars there, wounds that somehow filled me with both sorrow and hope. I asked him how this could be, how he could ask me to follow him when I was a Muslim, when my father was an imam, when my entire life was built on Islamic faith. He simply said that he was the truth I had been searching for all my life, and that if I truly wanted to know God, I needed to come through him. I woke up trembling and covered in sweat. The pre-dawn call to prayer was sounding from our mosque, but I could not move. What I had experienced was so powerful, so real, that everything else seemed dim in comparison. I had spent 23 years in Islamic devotion, had memorized the Quran, had prayed thousands of prayers, but I had never felt the presence of the divine the way I felt it in that vision of Jesus. For days I was tormented by what I had experienced. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as just a strange dream brought on by fasting and exhaustion. But another part of me knew it was more than that. It was a divine encounter, a moment when heaven had broken into my life and shown me truth that contradicted everything I had been taught. I became withdrawn and troubled, unable to focus on my studies or duties at the mosque. My father noticed and asked what was wrong with me. I told him I was just tired, but he was not convinced. He reminded me that I was preparing for important religious exams and could not afford to be distracted. The vision came again, this time even more powerful. Jesus appeared to me and spoke more clearly about who he was. He told me he was not just a prophet as Islam taught, but the Son of God who had died for the sins of the world and risen from the dead. He said that salvation was not earned through good works or perfect obedience but received as a gift through faith in him. He invited me again to follow him, warning me that the cost would be high but promising that he would never leave me. I woke up knowing I could not ignore this any longer. I had to find answers about who Jesus really was. But how could I, the Imam's son, seek information about Christianity without arousing suspicion? Peshawar had Christian communities, mostly poor and marginalized, but any contact with them would be noticed and questioned. I found a way through the internet. In the privacy of my room late at night, I began reading about Jesus, about his life and teachings, about what Christians believed. I discovered that the Jesus of the Bible was far more than the pale prophet figure presented in Islam. He claimed to be God, to have authority to forgive sins, to be the only way to the Father. He died on a cross bearing the punishment for human sin and rose again proving his victory over death. Everything I read resonated with what I had experienced in my visions. This was the Jesus who had appeared to me, the one whose presence had filled me with peace and love beyond anything I had known. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that he was telling me the truth, that he really was the way to God. But accepting this truth meant rejecting Islam, and rejecting Islam meant betraying everything and everyone I had ever known. I was not just any Muslim, I was the Imam's son, being groomed to be a religious leader myself. My apostasy would not just shame my family but would shake our entire community. My father's reputation and ministry would be destroyed. My mother and sisters would be branded as the family of an apostate. I wrestled with this decision for weeks, barely eating or sleeping, caught between truth and loyalty, between Jesus and my family. Finally, I could not carry the burden alone anymore. I made the most difficult decision of my life. I decided to tell my father. I chose a quiet evening when we were alone in his study, surrounded by his religious books and certificates. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I told him I needed to speak with him about something important. He put down the text he was reading and gave me his full attention, perhaps sensing the seriousness in my voice. I explained as carefully as I could that I had been having visions of of Jesus, and that these visions had led me to question and search. I told him I had been studying about Jesus and had come to believe that he was more than a prophet, that he was the Son of God and the Savior. I said I could no longer continue as a Muslim because I believed Jesus was calling me to follow him. The change in my father's face was terrible to witness. Color drained from him as if his blood had turned to ice. His eyes, usually warm when looking at me, became cold and hard. The silence stretched so long I thought he might not speak at all. Then he asked me in a voice I barely recognized if I understood what I was saying. I told him I did, that I had not come to this lightly, that I knew the cost but could not deny what I had experienced and learned. I begged him to try to understand, to listen to my reasons. He stood up, his whole body shaking with rage and grief. He said I had killed him, that I had destroyed our family, that I was no longer his son. He said the boy he had raised and loved was dead, replaced by an apostate and traitor. He ordered me out of his study, out of his sight. Within hours, my mother and sisters knew. My mother collapsed in tears, crying that she had failed as a mother, that Allah was punishing her through my betrayal. My sisters looked at me with fear and confusion, not understanding how their brother could have done such a terrible thing. The pain in their eyes cut deeper than any knife. My father called an emergency meeting with the mosque elders and leaders from our community. I was brought before them like a criminal, forced to stand while they questioned me about my beliefs. They asked if I had been influenced by Christian missionaries, if I had been bribed or deceived, if I was mentally ill. When I insisted that I had simply discovered truth through my own search and through visions of Jesus, they declared me an apostate who had willfully left Islam. According to Islamic law as they understood it, the punishment for apostasy was death. In Pakistan, this was not just religious opinion but reflected in actual practice. They gave me one chance to recant, to declare that I was still Muslim and renounce Christianity. My father stood among them, his face a mask of pain, and I knew he was hoping I would take the escape they were offering. But I could not. I had encountered the living Jesus, had experienced his love and truth, and I could not deny him to save my own life. So I told them clearly that I was a follower of Jesus Christ, that I believed he died for my sins and rose again, and that I could not and would not return to Islam. The room erupted in anger. Some men shouted that I should be killed immediately as an example to others who might consider leaving Islam. Others argued about proper procedure and legal considerations. My father said nothing, just stood with his head bowed as if he could not bear to look at me. They decided I would be taken to a more private location where the sentence could be carried out away from public attention. I was dragged from the mosque by several men, their faces twisted with righteous anger. They took me to an abandoned building on the outskirts of our district, a place where no one would witness what was about to happen. As they tied my hands and prepared to execute me, I prayed to Jesus. I told him I was ready to die for him if that was his will, but I asked him to save me if he had more for me to do. I felt a peace that made no sense given my circumstances, a calm assurance that whether I lived or died, I belonged to Jesus and nothing could separate me from his love. What happened next I can only describe as a miracle. A group of men burst into the building, shouting about police raid. In the chaos and confusion that followed, someone cut the ropes binding my hands. I ran, not knowing where I was going, just running for my life through streets I had known since childhood. Behind me I could hear shouting and pursuit, but somehow I managed to lose them in the maze of narrow alleys. I later learned that there had been no police raid. A Christian man who had heard about my situation had gathered some friends and created the diversion that saved my life. They found me hiding in an alley hours later, took me to a safe location, and connected me with an underground network of believers who helped people like me. The scars I carry are not just emotional. During my captivity, I was beaten severely. My ribs were cracked, my face was bruised and cut, and I have permanent marks on my wrists from the ropes. But these physical scars are nothing compared to the wound of losing my family. My mother suffered a massive stroke when she learned I had escaped and was still alive but living as a Christian. The shock and stress were too much for her heart and brain. She survived but was left partially paralyzed, unable to speak clearly. My father blames me for her condition, says I might as well have struck her myself. I live now in hiding, moving between safe houses, never staying in one place too long. The price on my head in our community is real. There are men who believe killing me would be an act of service to Allah. I cannot contact my family, cannot return to Peshawar, cannot live openly under my own name. But despite everything I have lost and suffered, I do not regret following Jesus. He has proven faithful in ways I could never have imagined. He has given me brothers and sisters in the faith who risk their own safety to protect me. He has given me purpose, using my story to encourage other seekers and strengthen believers who face persecution. And most importantly, He has given me Himself, a relationship with God based not on fear and performance but on love and grace. I still pray for my family every day. I pray that my father's heart will be softened, that my mother will recover, that my sisters will be protected from the fallout of my choices. I pray that one day they will understand that I did not betray them but simply followed truth when I encountered it. The Jesus who appeared to me in visions walks with me every day now. In my darkest moments of fear and loneliness, I feel His presence. When I am tempted to give up or go back, He reminds me of His own suffering and promises that my temporary troubles are achieving an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. If you are the son or daughter of a religious leader, if you are trapped in a faith that your family has invested everything in, if you are afraid of what seeking truth might cost you, I want you to know that Jesus sees you. He knows your situation and He calls you anyway. The cost of following Him may be higher than you can imagine, but He is worth it. He will never leave you, never abandon you, never stop loving you. I do not know what my future holds. I may spend the rest of my life in hiding. I may be caught and killed for my faith. Or I may see God open unexpected doors of opportunity and freedom. But whatever comes, I know that I have found truth, and truth has set me free. Jesus is not just a prophet or a good teacher. He is the Son of God, the Savior of the world, and the only way to know the Father. And that truth is worth every sacrifice, every loss, every scar.